So
yeah,
with a bit of luck, we are now live on Facebook. So my name is Becky Godfrey, and I am here today with two people that I know from my horse work, David Harris and Emma Taylor. And if I can turn the laptop round, can we see horses? I've lost them. There's some horses out here somewhere. Oh, no, that's my hair. Oh well, there are horses and they might come and join us. So Dave, do you know what? I actually have known you 10 years now and 4 days. In person, known you. Yeah, it was 10 years ago I came and did my training with you to train the trainer training.
Yeah, lovely.
And learned to become an equine assisted educator. And I wanted to do this session today because all of us have had really profound and powerful experiences with horses and from and through horses. And with everything that's going on at the moment, I really wanted to bring some of that wisdom and some of the opportunities that horses have brought us to everybody else. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. So Dave, first of all, can you tell people, how did you get into the work with the horses?
About 20 years ago, I was in the corporate world, very unhappy, very successful in a particular way of looking at it, which unfortunately wasn't really my way of looking at it, but I was very successful in that, and very unhappy and miserable at the same time. So, which begged a question for me, and I then started doing some personal development, which allowed me to answer some of those questions. Running in parallel with that, I met someone and I did a horse assisted education day, half day or whatever it was. And it was really a profound experience for me. And I could see the possibility of, for me, experiencing what I was experiencing and seeing what it allowed me and helped me to do. It seemed like a fantastic way of doing that for other people. So I came home to Sharon, my wife, and said, right, we're going to set up business doing this horse assisted education. She went, okay, let's go. And so we did. And we've been doing it ever since for about 17 years. And I think this speaks to a little bit to what we're talking about now. In that time, I don't know how many hundreds of people we've had, and we've never had one person where we've thought, I'm glad they're going. The people have always been absolutely wonderful. And I think part of what happens when we're with the horses is we allow ourselves to be our true selves without all the facade and the mask and everything else. And we tap into our core of who we are. And the horses really help and support to do that. And so magic happens every single time. So that's what we do and why we do it, really.
Brilliant. And Emma, same question to you. How did you get into working with horses?
I've always had horses in my life. I think probably first memory was being around a horse. And I actually had a corporate career. So I got a little certificate through the post this week, which reminded me that I'm 20 years in as a CIPD member, so an HR professional. I didn't quite realise it's been 20 years, but it has. So I was working within that context within various different organisations. And part of my responsibility was looking at learning and development for organisations. So we were spending vast amounts of money sending people away on various different leadership and learning and management development courses, and something wasn't transferring back. There was a gap. The sustainable behavioural change wasn't happening within the organisations. Alongside that, I had a horse called Hermie, who was my foundation of my herd, a 17-1 Clydesdale mare. And every night I would go home and go to the stables, put my hand on her. And for the first time that day, nobody was judging me. Nobody wanted anything from me. It was just that sense of being and connecting without all the artifice that we put around ourselves and our working lives. And Google's a wonderful thing. So I thought, there's got to be something in this. There has to be a way that horses have got more to teach us. So I met Dave, I trained in this work, and really that's what I've been doing for the last 7 years now.
Yeah, and my story is really similar. I grew up with horses, and for me it was a case of, I used to work with farmers, and it was you knew how hard to push them and when to back off, because you knew how to read their body language. And I started to ask myself the question, how do I know how to read body language? And of course, when a horse comes in from the field just waving a leg randomly in the air, and you're like, oh God, what have you done? They can't just go, well, Becky, I trod on a stone and then I twisted my fetlock and it's really sore. You need to put some ice on it. You start to have to read body language and start to learn to understand, to communicate with a non-verbal being. And that was translating into people skills. And similar to you, Emma, I was seeing all these leadership programs and development programs out there and just feeling like they didn't really hit the mark compared to what I had waiting in the stable at home for me and the education I got from growing up with horses. So it became really apparent to me, and it was the NHS actually that was the organisation that stood out the most for me, where something like learning experiences with horses could make a massive difference in a really short space of time, and fundamentally sort of evolve the way that an organisation works and bring a lot more harmony and a lot more clarity, structure, and understanding about what it means to work together as a team. And there's sort of common themes really that we all experience, isn't it? The horse work is incredibly powerful. So what I wanted to explore today was a little bit about how, and this topic just came from nowhere, but adapting to change. Because obviously for a vast number of people right now, life is incredibly different. You know, they may be having to work from home, they're maybe got their loved ones home with them, and having to find sort of separate workspaces to operate from. You guys both are being restricted about how much you can go and see your horses. I'm really lucky, mine are at home with me, but you've been giving allotted times for when you can go and see them. So lots of people are dealing with lots of new circumstances and lots of change. And I wanted to, between us, just talk about what you've learned from horses about adapting from change and what horses know about adapting to change. And you were saying something earlier, Dave, that I thought was really useful. Can you remember what you were saying?
Probably not. I think I mentioned the fact that, I mean, I'm just going to step back a little bit. I haven't been around horses all my life.
Okay.
So I had horses in my life when I was about 8. And then I had a big gap till probably I was 38. So I had lost track, but I knew when I was 8 that when I spent time with them, something was different. And I think what we were talking about was how horses have navigated through massive changes in the environment. I mean, over 60 million years, the numbers of changes in environment and stuff have been nothing, you know, what we're going through now is nothing compared to that. And they've always navigated these changes and they've always come out the other side successfully. That, you know, they live as herds, they look after each other, they do whatever it is they need to navigate that. So I think energetically, this is part of what we experience in when we get connected with the energy as opposed to the which is reality. I think this is the interesting thing. Horses deal with what is right here, right now. They may carry a bit of baggage from something that's happened past, but to me, not much. So their attention is, what is it that needs to happen right now? And this is why it's so beautiful working with them. And I think part of the challenge that we're experiencing now is if we're not present with what needs to happen for me, for my herd, or family or company or whatever, and the environment right now, because fundamentally most of us have got everything we need. If we actually look at it from that perspective, what tends to happen is we get drawn out of, and that my word for that would be presence, we get drawn out of presence into what if this goes on for another 6 months? What if this was like that thing that happened to me when I was whatever? And we kind of get drawn out of what it is that it is to be present, grounded and centered. So I think for me, you know, this hasn't meant a massive change, I think. And I think talking to the three of you, it's limited the time we have with horses, okay. But other than that, it's sort of business as usual. And I think part of what's happening for us is we live that way as well. So I think navigating change and whatever, and we've been talking about uncertainty and all these things for years, basically, because the business environment was uncertain. You know, the term often used is VUCA, which I might be able to remember what it is: volatile, unpredictable, chaotic, and ambiguous. We've been talking about that as a business term for a number of years. And for me, the interesting thing about what's happened with the coronavirus is we thought we knew what unpredictability was. You know, it had boundaries to it. Well, of course, it's unpredictable, but we still go to the office. We still can go wherever we want to, with whoever we want to. And all of a sudden, that's just gone. Could I just tell you a little story? That's something that happened to me. It's about 5 years ago, and I was in Germany doing as a participant on a workshop, which is very unusual for me. And we were in the horse hall, and I lead a lot in the programs and the like. And I thought, I'm going to let this horse lead me wherever it wants. And the horse took me to a couple of places and then went to leave the horse hall. And then I got into a fight with the horse because I didn't want him to leave the horse hall. And it wasn't until afterwards that I realized I'd asked him to lead me, but I'd set a boundary in place that I didn't even realize existed, which was the horse hall. Lead me where you like in the horse hall. He didn't have that presupposition. He had, I can lead you out, and actually I want to go and eat grass, so that's where we're going to go. And so for me, this was in a way a parallel to what's just happened with us. We thought we knew what VUCA was, and all of a sudden it's been completely blown away. And the other thing, of course, which you both know, is they're just carrying on as normal. Horses, it hasn't made a blind bit of difference to them because they're present, they're just getting on with their lives. What do I need to give my attention to right now? Sorry, long answer for a short question.
No, brilliant answer. And I think you're right about the parallels with business. The connection you make about understanding the volatile marketplace, and we're just seeing perhaps some of that volatility on a grander and larger scale, more global scale. But these are all skills that you say we've been playing with these concepts for a long time. And so I love the way you describe about being very present and how potentially we don't feel that there's been massive changes, but we just live in the presence continuum. It's just literally this next present moment, as the horses do. I love the way in the 3 positions of leadership, Dave, you describe about how when the lead mare, she decides which direction, pace, and the destination. And when they get to the destination, she puts her head down to eat grass, to tell everyone that everything is safe and that we need to replenish our resources. And I feel like that is a really sort of bold statement about living in the moment. We respond to stimulus. We execute whatever it is that we need to do. And then when that stimulus has been safely removed, or we've removed ourselves from the stimulus, we go back to normal. And I love knowing that that can be true for us too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Emma, what's your take on how horses can help us through this time of uncertainty and change?
So I was just listening to Dave and to you and kind of nodding and going, yeah, that's very similarly. Not a lot apart from my time that I'm able to spend with horses has fundamentally changed. And I think there's it is that exactly what we've been talking about. It is the sense of presence, but it's also the sense of having let go of the need to control and predict.
Mm.
So having let go of it will look like this if it doesn't look like that, and really leaning into trust, really leaning into that on a micro scale within ourselves, but on a bigger scale within our friends, within our family, within our communities. And now we're having to do that, you know, as a country and as a world, that we're having to trust that we will get through this. And again, you know, you see this with the horses. They are, like you were talking about, they do respond and come back, but also just how adaptable they are, just how quickly they can move through the change as well is I think something we have a lot to learn from. And we get to choose how we react to it. So one of the things I'm really interested in is, so Sparky, my Spanish stallion, he every day when I go to turn him out, or we go to get him in, we've got electric fencing, and the electric fencing, whether it's on or not, he will always have a good look at it. He's genuinely quite worried by it. He pops in. We went to lead him out the other day, and he accidentally touched, I mean, tiny, and he's very dramatic and flamboyant and Spanish, and legs are in the air, and he goes, whoa! And on the end of the rope is me. And at that moment, he had a choice whether to keep reacting in fear, that thing's going to get him, it's going to get him, he's not safe, or he had the choice, when I put my hand on his neck, he says, okay, dude, it's okay, to trust me, that things can change. And that was so, because I you know, I knew that, you know, he might touch the fence again, but I knew that, you know, I wasn't going to let him do that right now. So it's really simple things like that choice of how we choose to react. And that, I think, at the moment is really important. For me, I'm limiting some of the things that I'm watching around or listening to. I'm being careful where I get information, actually. And I think the horses do that too. You know, they watch to see who's picking. Dave, you've got a lovely story about, I'm trying to remember who it was, one of yours that used to go and pick the best bits of the grass. So nobody else used to have to worry about all that stuff because they got a trusted source of information of where that would come from. So yeah, I think it's, sorry, again, a long answer.
That's perfect.
Adaptability, trust, choosing how we want to feel in this. Yeah,
I think trust, absolutely. I had a horse that taught me an incredible story about how trust is the antidote to fear. So I used to have a beautiful 15-hand Irish draft horse called Murphy. And Murphy was very much an adult's horse, but then nieces and nephews came into my life, and we didn't have small ponies, so he had to become the ride for you know, 4, 5, 6-year-olds. And he was in his more senior years, so he was pretty calm, pretty sensible. But he was pretty terrified by the small people, as he called them. But one day my niece really wanted to have a ride, so he had to step up and do the role. And that entire session, what got him through was the trust in me. He brought all this fear. It was a huge unknown. He didn't know what small people like and how their energy was managed and whether he could do this or not, but he trusted me. And so through that partnership and that bond that we had, I was able to, I guess, lend him the courage, the support, the guidance, the advice that he needed to do something he didn't think he could do. And so for me, I took away how powerful trust is as an antidote to fear. And I guess in the current climate, it's about trusting yourself, first of all, just honoring your own inner resources, your own intelligence, your own wisdom, your own desire to sort of look out for yourself. It's about trusting the people around you, that they've got your back, they've got your best interest at heart, that the country is doing everything it can to move through this scenario. And it's about trusting the sort of wider world at large, that to drop this idea that you're being attacked or a victim and start to trust that this, we were saying before the call, Dave, about this is going to take us somewhere good. You know, you're saying ultimately you must be, you know, an optimist or something like that, but you think something really good is going to come out of this.
It always does. I mean, and lest we also forget that there are people dying from this.
Exactly.
And I don't want to make this seem like trivial or anything else. This is horrendous. This is the biggest thing and the most terrifying, or whatever language you want to use it, that's happened since the Second World War, probably. So I don't want to belittle that, and I want to honour the fact that people are losing loved ones and the like. Let's not sort of gloss over that. And that, of course, is the reality. To me, the opportunity from that reality is, what can we learn from this? Yeah. What are the things? I was on a call the other day, and one of the mums, there was a mum who had her kids at home, and she said, the question I asked myself was, when we look back on this, what do I want my kids to be saying? Do I want them to be saying, it was terrifying, we were locked indoors, we were shut? She said, or do I want them to say, well, it was so cool, we did this in the garden, we did this in the garden, you know, and make it a learning experience. That's what evolution is. You know, this is an evolutionary process, whether we like it or not. And one of the definitions of evolution is you solve one problem, and in this case, it could be global travel, and you create a more complex one. And then you learn to solve that one. And then you know, that it's Claire Graves' spiral dynamics, that's fundamentally what it speaks to. And that's what we're experiencing now. To me, the only tragedy, and what would mean the loss of this life was even worse than it is already, is if we go straight back to what we were doing before without having learned anything. Because my sense is, from what I'm seeing I'm like you, I'm very careful about what I choose to listen to and whatever. And for me, it's statistics, because to me, the data is the data, and I've got a reliable source of that. What we can do is we can choose where we put our energy. That then allows us to respond in a way which we've chosen, as opposed to being, I think one of the dangers is people get slightly into fear, then they feel that they have to feed, you know, why am I scared? So I'll watch the news for an hour, which then creates another cycle of fear, which is, and none of that is about presence. Actually, that is about what is the worst thing that could possibly happen. Well, that's not present, that's in the future. What is it we need right now? The other thing that I wanted to speak to, Becky, was you talked about peace. And I had a coaching trainer called Julio Aloa, who, of all the coaches I've ever encountered, he was like, everyone was here and he's like up there, amazing. And he said, he had like a model that he used as a diagnostic tool, but the only bit we need to know about is peace is acceptance of what actually is. Doesn't mean you have to like it. It means being at peace with something is when you say, well, this is happening and I don't like it particularly, but actually it's happening. How am I with it so that it doesn't detract from my experience? You know, and there are other states, like resentment is the non-acceptance of what is. So people are being resentful about this. Well, why am I not allowed out and whatever? Because they don't accept the reality that would then take them to a place of peace. So, you know, I know the big title of what it is you're doing is about being at peace. And I think what we can learn from horses is stuff happens, they deal with it, and then they come back to peace with it, because frankly, their brains don't cope with anything. Their brains can't cope with anything else. So they come right back to being present, grounded, centered, whatever language you want to use. And that then brings them back into a place of peace.
They're so good at being authentic about their emotions, aren't they?
Absolutely.
And they're so in the moment with it. I mean, you must see it. You take Sparky to lots of events, don't you, Emma? Does he get sort of whizzed up going to them? How does he respond to that? Because it's quite an interesting environment that you go to.
Yeah, well, do you know, Sparky responds to me. So it'll be how whizzed up I am. One of the things I've learned from him particularly, and we compete in showing classes in traditional Spanish kit, and we also Tim does a sport called working equitation. We do a bit of dressage, and it's interesting. I guess and I compete for fun. I want to be really clear about this, because to me it's a dance. It's a dance with Sparky and I. The minute it's not fun, we don't enjoy it, I stop doing it. And I actually think that's really important, and maybe that your point about how does Sparky feel in these environments, because we are going there with this shared intent of creating something joyous, usually with the three, Tim, myself and Sparky, in a place of gratitude where we're just happy to be able to spend time together and enjoy what we do. Mm-hmm. I think that's very different from what I often see in kind of equestrians who are competing. There's often a lot of stress and pressure, and I think I've looked at myself really hard, and I don't have what people would call performance or anxiety or competition nerves, mainly because I just enjoy it. So Sparky's a stallion, and sometimes that can be quite difficult for people. I've discovered this in the last year when you go competing, because he looks like a stallion. And there is an assumption that he will behave in a stallion-y way. So he will look at all the other mares, he'll be difficult to handle, he'll be bolshy. He is the sweetest, kindest, most relaxed. He is the horse that will be there nudging everyone's pocket for a mint. So he is another great thing we learn from them. It's just, don't judge what your perception of that situation is. Mm-hmm. You know, this is a beautiful Spanish stallion, but he is kind and gentle. The only time I see him change is we just spoke of work equitation, and they have an obstacle round. And I can feel a shift change in him then. Mm-hmm. I can feel him see the obstacles, and it's a really joyous moment. You can feel him lift himself, and you can feel him kind of, right, okay, I'm ready to go. And that's really beautiful, because that feels like you're just, again, it's a lovely energy, but he does know, I think he understands what's coming, and he's there to enjoy it. But it's very much about how I approach it. So I think a great lesson to me is if I'm there and I'm maybe running a bit late, or something hasn't gone as planned, if I start rushing or panicking, or I'm trying to get a plait in, he'll just turn around, or he'll step away from me. He'll just move out of that chaotic space, because he doesn't want to be with that. So my first reaction has to look at that and be, what have I created? Right, okay, do I want to change that? Yes, I do. Thank you, Sparky. And go back to that state.
Which is great, because obviously some people are going to be living in houses on top of one another. And what you've just described is asking yourself the question, you know, when there's an external change, how am I responsible? Rather than going, you did this, you did that, it's because of you made me, etc., etc. Yeah. It's about taking that step back, reflecting, and go, right, I'm a partner in this dynamic. What do I need to change or do, or what do they need me to be in this moment? Those sort of powerful questions that bring it back to a place of power, where we can do something rather than feeling like a victim because it's something that's going on outside of us we can do nothing about.
And the two things that I kind of wanted to touch on as well, one is the use of language during what's happening at the moment. Mm-hmm. And obviously the communication with the horses is mostly non-verbal. I don't use the word lockdown. I use the word safe. And I feel incredibly, I'm very honoured and very lucky that I do not have to go. My job is not one that involves me being out on the front lines during this situation. And I am doing things to work with an organisation that is supporting people at the moment who have, who are out there. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I have an enormous sense of gratitude that that's not, that's, you know, I would do it, but we are lucky enough to be safe rather than unfortunate to be locked down. And I think that's a huge difference in how you think about it. The other thing is, Dave and I were just saying before the start of the call, you know, what, and you mentioned it again there, Dave, about, well, what are we learning from this? What are going to be the learning outcomes? And you mentioned a couple of things about things that you've experienced, about kindnesses, about how people are interacting with each other, and we're creating a different sense of community. Can you remember what you were talking about?
One of the things that struck me was I've had tears in my eyes. I don't always call it crying, because people often associate crying with being sad, and that wasn't what it was. It moved, deeply moved by some of the events that are taking place. And it's not the sadness that does move me, of course, of death and the like. More often what moves me is the simple acts of kindness that people do. Someone put, I mean, this was also slightly funny, someone put a letter through a little card through my door saying, if you need someone to get your prescriptions and stuff, clearly they view me as ancient and old and vulnerable, you know. But such a beautiful act of kindness that, you know, that I don't know who that person is. Never met them. There was a guy who made it through, quite an old guy who made it through, he was in an ICU, came out, they lined the corridors and cheered him and clapped him out, and he was in a wheelchair. What a wonderful sense of community. Do you know, part of me thinks, now this is just the way I think, part of me thinks in a way this is, whatever it is, the energy or the field or whatever going to us, you had this and you didn't realize you valued it, and now you haven't got it, which is community and the like. You know, we took for, do you know the thing I missed most? Holding my grandchildren's hand. That's the thing. I can see them and whatever, but I have rough, gnarly, horrible hands. And when I feel their soft little hand, it's just one of those things. That's what I miss. And I know it's going to come back. When it does come back, it'll feel even more special. So I think in these times, if we choose to focus on what are the amazing things that happen, of course, we have to give attention to keeping safe. We have to give attention to, how do I choose to engage with this big system? And my way of dealing with it is to do as I'm told, frankly, to stay in. You know, I think I put a post out, how many times in your life do you get a chance to save someone's life? How many times? And we're all getting that chance every day by staying in. Those choices don't confine us. They allow us to be enormously powerful. And I think the at peace part with this, Becky, is, you know, I'm sitting here thinking, it's easy for me to say this with a big garden. I have access to the horses a couple of times a day. You know, you're on the 30th floor with 2 young children who want to run around. Their reality, someone's reality is very different. Perhaps this is a chance to stop and say, the reality I have at the moment is I am stuck on the 30th floor. The reality I have at the moment is we can't run around. How can we express, how can we get the things that we get from running around by being in here? You know, some people are doing Joe Wicks in the morning, 9 o'clock, you know, this is another thing that's sprung forward, and what an amazing guy he is, trying to get the country fit. So when we make choices, we then, as Emma so beautifully put, we step out of being a victim and we then become empowered. And when we become empowered, all is available, really.
It really is. And I think that's a really beautiful note to end on. That actually really there is a choice there of how we interpret the situation. And for me, horses are incredibly resourceful. They're so forgiving. And they're great role models of just doing the best with what you have. Anything you want to add to that, Emma, before we wrap this up?
Thank you, Becky, for what you've done with creating the Peace Project. And I think, I just want to say you're absolutely awesome as a human being. And thank you for really bringing what is needed, because I think that's the question that I feel you would have asked yourself. And I know Dave will feel the same. Really happy to share the time with you today. Thank you.
And in a way, Becky, you're a model for this that we're talking about, taking action. You've done it countless times. I'm not even going to read it. You say, what is required now? I'm going to go and do that. Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah. And just before we finish, I will try and walk this over because the guys are still here. You have to tell me if you can see them.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have horses.
And actually, it wouldn't be the first time this week that they've been on video calls with clients and just eating. You know, it's amazing how much someone gets from just watching a horse just eat a bit of grass, chilling out. So thank you to them too, because they're a huge source of grounding for me, huge source of inspiration, and we love them very much, don't we?
Of course.
We do.
All right, well, I'll get you two guys to hang on the line, but I am going to stop the Facebook for now. So thank you all very much. If you've got any questions, it didn't feel right to ask them today, but please pop them in the comments box below. I'm sure Emma and Dave will check them and get back to you if you've got anything you want to ask. Okay, bye for now.